The thunder cracked like a whip across the scorched sky, splitting the silence of the dying afternoon. Dust swirled along the ridgeline, curling through the air in lazy golden spirals. Below, 5 bodies lay still, scattered across the dry earth, like broken dolls. Smoke rose from the barrels of 2 pistols, one now holstered, the other still clenched in a rough, scarred hand. The man who held it did not look victorious, just tired and angry. He adjusted his hat, pushing it low against the wind, and turned his back on the carnage. His boots crunched across gravel and shattered glass, the sound unaccompanied by anything but the distant whistle of wind through mesquite trees. No cheers, no judgment, just the hush of blood cooling under the sun. By the time he reached his horse, he looked like a shadow of a man, carved from old leather and something even older. Grime and blood clung to his coat. His limp was more pronounced than usual, his right boot dragging slightly. Still, he mounted without help. One fluid, motion hardened by years of repetition. He didn't ride fast. He never did. The angry ones didn't need to. They called him Marshal once, back when Law still tried to hold the West together. That was before the fire, before they found what was left of his cabin and the 2 bodies inside, charred beyond anything a man should ever have to bury. Wife, child, gone in the smoke and the blackened wood. He never spoke their names again. Never let another woman stay long enough to remind him what he'd lost. He rode south that evening toward the edge of the desert, where his half-finished ranch sat like a forgotten promise. No one came by unless they were looking for trouble, or work, or sometimes both. When he arrived, the gate hung open on a broken hinge. He didn't fix it. Instead, he dismounted and led his horse to the small corral, letting it drink deeply. The sun bled into the horizon, casting the sky in streaks of crimson and copper. The house stood squat and wide, its frame old but steady. It was cleaner now than it had been a month ago. That was her doing. She was already in the kitchen when he stepped through the door, the smell of stew faintly masking the scent of old wood and dust. She didn't look up, just kept stirring, her sleeves rolled to the elbow, dark curls pinned in a bun that always unraveled by nightfall. The girl, her daughter, was on the floor nearby, drawing something in the ash with a stick. He ignored them both, took off his hat, set it on the hook, poured a glass of water from the jug on the table. "You're late," the woman said, voice steady, low. "I'm alive," he replied. "That's supposed to be comfort?" He didn't answer. She didn't push. 3 weeks ago, he'd posted a notice in town. Help wanted. Cleaning, cooking, no questions. She was the only one who replied. No name, no references, just a sharp look and a tighter grip on her daughter's hand. He hired her because she looked like she'd seen worse and lived. She didn't flinch at the silence, didn't gossip, and most of all, didn't cry. That first night, she made soup too salty and swept only where he walked. The girl tried to pet his dog, long since buried, and he yelled without thinking. She cried then, big silent tears. Her mother stood between them, eyes like cold steel, and said only, "You do that again, and we're gone." He hadn't raised his voice since. Now, weeks in, they were fixtures, quiet ones, ghosts who cooked and cleaned and said thank you without expecting a reply. He never asked their names. Didn't want them. Names got sticky. Names got buried. The stew simmered. She ladled it into bowls. The girl brought him a spoon. She'd stopped asking questions after the 3rd time he ignored her, and returned to her little spot on the floor. "Riders came through town," he muttered, not looking up. "Looking for what?" "Not sure." "Sheriff's nervous." She sat, rubbed her palms on her skirt. "You think they'll come here?" He shrugged. "They always do, eventually. I won't have my daughter in the middle of that." "You came here," he said. "You stay. On my land, you follow my rules." She met his eyes then, dark and tired. "And what are your rules exactly?" He didn't answer. Not because he didn't know, but because he did. "Don't speak. Don't ask. Don't care." The girl finished her stew in silence. Then she spoke, softly. Your horse has a new scratch on his leg. His jaw clenched. Don't touch my horse. I didn't. I just saw it. He stared at her for a moment, eyes unreadable. Then, you named the chickens yet? She brightened slightly. The white one's Admiral Peck, the mean red one's Susan. He snorted once, a noise close to a laugh. She grinned. Her mother didn't smile, just stood and collected the bowls. She won't be a nuisance. She's not. The woman paused. It was the first kindness he'd offered. She didn't mention it. Later, when the moon rose and the wind settled, he sat alone on the porch, a bottle of whiskey in one hand, his pistol in the other. The boards beneath him creaked with every shift of his weight. He watched the desert, saw nothing but stars and shadows. Inside, the girl had fallen asleep with a blanket half off, her sketch clutched in one hand. Her mother pulled it free, smoothed it. It was a picture of a man and a horse, and a red ribbon on the saddle. She tucked the blanket tighter, stepped outside. You should sleep, she said. Can't. You ever? Sometimes. When I'm not expecting ghosts. She crossed her arms. You really think someone's coming? He didn't answer. She looked at the gun resting on his thigh. You always keep that close? Only when I expect company. She considered him for a long moment. You know, you don't have to be angry all the time. He took a drink. Keeps people away. She leaned against the post beside him, her profile etched in silver moonlight. Not always. They sat in silence a while. The air between them wasn't warm, but it wasn't hostile either. Just tired. Eventually, she spoke again, quieter this time. I'm not going to ask what happened, I can see it in your eyes. You lost everything. He looked down at his drink. I didn't lose it. It was taken. She didn't press. But her presence shifted. From stranger to something else, not familiar, not yet, but less foreign. The girl mumbled in her sleep. A soft cry, then stillness. The woman moved to go in. She's strong, he said suddenly. She paused. She had to be. Like her mother. She blinked once. You know what they called me. Before I came here, he didn't reply. They called me the widow, like it was a title, like it was all I had left. Is it? Not anymore. A moment passed. The breeze stirred. Then she went inside. He stayed, finished the bottle, and watched the desert until dawn threatened to break over the horizon. The next morning, he found a red ribbon tied to his horse's bridle. He almost untied. It almost. Instead, he left it there. Dust rose in the distance, riders. Not near, not yet, but coming, always coming. Morning came hard and pale, the kind of light that settled more like a memory than a promise. The wind stirred the grass just enough to whisper through the cracks in the porch boards. Inside the ranch house, everything was quiet, except the clinking of tin cups and the low scrape of spoons against worn bowls. He sat at the table, chewing slowly. Across from him, the woman poured coffee with a steady hand. She never asked how he liked it, just brewed it strong enough to peel paint, and poured it without ceremony. He hadn't told her, but he drank every cup. The girl hummed as she fed the chickens. The tune was tuneless, made up on the spot, but cheerful in a way that didn't match the dry heat or the heavy quiet of the land. She wore a makeshift apron tied high around her middle and named a new hen that morning, Sheriff Beak. He'd heard it from the window and rolled his eyes, but he didn't tell her to stop. The woman returned to the sink. She cleaned with the kind of precision that came from having nothing left to waste. Every scrap was saved, every rag washed and reused. She moved like she had a ledger in her head, like she was always calculating how long her luck might hold. He watched her for a moment too long. She didn't notice or pretended not to. You got a limp today, she said finally, not turning. It's an old limp. Looks newer. He grunted. Got kicked by a horse once. Ain't worth remembering. Pain has a way of remembering for you. That stopped him. He set his cup down and looked at her. Really looked. There were lines around her eyes that didn't come from laughter. A faded scar just below her collarbone, partially hidden by her dress. She wore grief like armor, quiet, hard, functional. Outside, the girl laughed, a sudden, sharp sound that startled the chickens. She was chasing a rooster, feet bare in the dirt, braid swinging behind her like a rope caught in the wind. "You let her run wild out there," he said. "She's not made for cages." "World is." She met his eyes then. "Doesn't mean I have to clip her wings." The silence after was heavy, not uncomfortable, just thick with the weight of two people who'd lost more than they were willing to speak about. He rose and stepped outside. The sun had climbed higher now, glaring off the dry earth. His horse stood near the fence, chewing slowly, the red ribbon still tied to its bridle. He reached for it, hesitated, then left it. "She said it's for luck," came the voice behind him. "She say that to you?" "She says a lot of things. You'd hear them if you listened." He didn't reply. Instead, he walked to the barn, eyes scanning the fence line. Something wasn't sitting right. He couldn't say what, but there was a twitch in his gut he trusted more than any warning. Years of chasing men across deserts had left him with an instinct sharper than most. Inside the barn, he checked the tack, the tools, the corners where rats sometimes nested. Nothing out of place. And yet, as he moved through the shadows, something pulled at him. A memory, maybe. Or the shape of one. He stopped beside the old trough. One of the boards had been pried loose. Not recent, not fresh. But it wasn't like that yesterday. He replaced it without comment. That night, the wind picked up. Dust curled through the cracks again, swirling around the girl's bare feet as she danced near the hearth. The firelight cast strange shapes on the wall, flickering, between warmth and warning. He sat by the door, whittling a strip of cedar into something that might have been a bird. Or a horse. He wasn't sure yet. "You ever carve anything for your kids?" the girl asked suddenly. He looked up, knife paused mid-stroke. "Didn't have time to carve much of anything." She tilted her head. "What did you have time for?" He didn't answer. Her mother gave her a look and she quieted, curling up on the rug with a book too worn to be read properly. Later, as the flames dimmed and the girl slept, the woman stayed behind. She stood near the fire, arms folded, shoulders tight. "She asks because she wants to know what kind of man you are," she said. He leaned back in his chair. "And what kind am I?" "The kind who carries ghosts. The kind who doesn't realize he's still alive." He snorted. "That your way of saying, thank you for dinner?" She ignored the sarcasm. "You think you're protecting yourself by keeping distance, but she sees more than you think. Kid's got imagination. She's got heart. Something you lost somewhere along the way." He didn't like the way she said that, like it was a fact, not an accusation. He stood, holstered his pistol, and walked past her to the door. "I'm keeping you both alive, that's what matters. Alive ain't the same as living." He froze. Not long. Just enough for her to see it mattered. The next morning he rode into town. The sheriff met him outside the general store, hat pulled low, eyes darting like a man waiting for news he didn't want. "Something wrong?" he asked. "Depends on your definition. 3 men came through last night, didn't stay, asked about your land, about you." He tensed. "They say names?" "Nope. Just left a message." The sheriff handed him a bullet. The casing was carved, a symbol etched into the brass, a jagged circle with a line through it. He knew that mark. He'd seen it before, on a barn wall blackened by fire. He pocketed the bullet. Didn't say a word. "Keep your eyes open," the sheriff muttered. They weren't passing through. They were scouting. He nodded and mounted up. His ride back was faster than usual, the sky growing heavier with each mile. When he returned, the woman was hanging laundry. The girl played nearby, lining stones into strange patterns on the ground. He dismounted, walked past them without speaking, and went straight into the barn. He opened a crate beneath the feed bags and pulled out 2 rifles. Checked the chambers, clean, loaded. He strapped on an extra belt of ammunition and sat on the stool beside the tools. She found him there an hour later, staring into nothing. "They're coming, aren't they?" He didn't look at her. "Eventually." "Why?" "Because the past doesn't let men like me go." She stepped forward. "You going to fight them alone?" "That was always the plan." "And if I said I want to fight too?" He turned then, slowly. "You don't know what you're asking. I know what happens to people who wait to be rescued. I've seen enough of that." He looked at her, really looked. For the first time, he saw something beyond survival in her eyes. Resolve. Fire. "You ever fired a rifle?" "Once. Killed a coyote trying to take my baby in the night." He passed her the smaller gun. She took it without hesitation. Outside, the girl sang softly to herself, a lullaby no child that young should know. He glanced out the barn window. The wind had shifted. The birds were gone. Even the insects had fallen silent. "They won't come tonight," he muttered. "But soon," she replied. "Yes, soon." He sat beside her on the barn floor, watching the sky fade into dusk. For the first time since she arrived, he didn't feel entirely alone. The fire inside him hadn't gone out. It had just been buried. Now, piece by piece, it was coming back to life. He didn't know if he could protect them, but he knew he would try. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to start again. The next 3 days settled over the ranch like the hush before a storm. Too still, too quiet, and heavy with the weight of waiting. The wind came from the east now, dry and whispering through the grasses in a voice that spoke of old blood and unburied bones. He didn't sleep. Neither did the woman. They kept watch in shifts, one always near the door, the other never far from the girl. The laughter had faded. Even the chickens clucked softer, as if they sensed the tension tightening around the place, like a noose. He worked through the hours sharpening knives, oiling the rifles, patching fence posts that didn't need fixing. She cleaned with more force than usual, scrubbing pots that were already clean, stacking wood that didn't need stacking. And in between it all, they exchanged glances that said everything words couldn't. The girl noticed. She didn't ask questions. Just stayed close to her mother and offered quiet drawings. Horses with wings, sons with smiling faces, a man with a crooked leg holding hands with a woman and child. He found them tucked in his saddlebag, folded into his coat pocket, beneath his pillow. He never said a word, but he didn't throw a single one away. On the fourth morning, the dust trail appeared on the horizon, just one rider at first. He stepped out onto the porch, rifle in hand, and watched the figure grow clearer. The woman stood at the edge of the barn, shotgun resting in the crook of her arm. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. This wasn't the attack. This was a message. The rider slowed as he approached the gate. Young, lean, face shadowed beneath, a wide-brimmed hat. He held up one hand, palm out. Peace or parley, it didn't matter. The rifle stayed raised. The boy stopped at the edge of the property, boots coated in red dust, horse sweating hard. "I ain't here to start trouble," he called out. "Then turn around," the man said. The boy reached into his coat slowly, deliberately, and pulled out a piece of paper. He held it high, then let it drift down into the dirt. "From Elias. Says he remembers you." The man didn't move. "He send anything else?" "Just the message. You owe him 3 lives. He's coming to collect." The man's jaw clenched. "Tell him I paid already." "Didn't seem to think so." The boy tugged his reins. "He'll be here by dusk tomorrow, said you'd want time." The rider turned and left without waiting for permission. He didn't look back. The woman stepped beside him now. "Who's Elias?" He didn't answer right away. The name alone had carved something deep and raw into his chest. He picked up the paper, stared at the crude handwriting. 10 years ago, he ran with a gang out of Dry Hollow, robbed a stagecoach carrying federal payroll, killed the driver, a woman, and her infant son. They laughed about it, burned the coach after. Her voice was tight. And you? I tracked them, one by one, put 6 feet of dirt between Elias and his brothers. Or so I thought. You left him alive. I left him buried under a collapsed mine shaft. Figured the mountain had done my work for me. She looked out across the fields. Clearly it didn't. No. And now he wants. To finish what I started, he folded the paper and put it in his coat. Get the girl inside, start packing. You don't need to be here for this. Her eyes flared. So what? You hired us to cook and sweep and now we just run like dogs when it gets dangerous? I hired you to survive, he said sharply, not die for a mistake I made. I decide what my daughter and I die for. And I sure as hell don't run from men like that. He stared at her, anger boiling just beneath the surface. But beneath it was something else. Fear. She's just a child, he whispered. She's mine, she said, and the weight of those words was heavier than any rifle. That night they boarded up windows, dug shallow trenches around the house, set lanterns and traps and loaded every gun twice. She worked beside him, sleeves rolled, eyes sharp. He gave her orders. She followed them like a soldier. Not because she was obedient, but because she knew the value of a plan. The girl watched from the kitchen table, her small hands holding a drawing of 3 wolves in the dark. Are the bad men wolves? She asked. He looked down at her, the smallest flicker of a smile passing through him. Something worse. She nodded like she understood. Maybe she did. By dawn, they were ready. As ready as anyone ever is for death. The sun rose blood orange, over the ridge. A cold wind blew through the valley, bringing with it the stink of gunpowder and sweat and something older, something feral. He stood on the porch again, rifle slung across his chest, hand steady despite the quake in his soul. At noon they came 5 riders, black coats, hard eyes, horses lathered and mean. Elias rode in the center, his face a tapestry of old scars, teeth yellow from rot and hate. He dismounted before the others, walked slowly toward the gate. No fear, no rush. The man stepped forward, to meet him halfway. Well, Elias grinned, voice like broken glass. I figured you'd rot in some canyon by now, but here you are, upright, armed, and still ugly. I buried you, the man said. You tried. Elias looked past, him toward the house. Didn't know you took to keeping company. Who's the girl? The man raised the rifle an inch. You ask again, I shoot. Elias chuckled. Still got that righteous anger, I see. That'll make this more fun. The man's voice dropped. This ends today. I reckon it does. Elias turned, gave a signal with one crooked finger. The men spread out, fanning across the field. No pretense of diplomacy now. Just war. The woman crouched behind the upstairs window, shotgun aimed at the door. The girl hid beneath the floorboards, quiet as a held breath. Every board in the house creaked with tension. The first shot rang out sharp and clean. The man took it, fired from the hip, catching one rider square in the chest. The horse reared and fled, leaving the body sprawled in the dust. Then chaos. Gunfire exploded across the ranch, echoing like thunder in a canyon. Dust rose in thick clouds, choking the air. The woman fired twice, hitting another rider in the shoulder. He screamed and fell from his mount. The man moved like a shadow, ducking behind. The wagon firing, reloading, firing again. Elias circled the house, pistol in hand, eyes hungry. He reached the porch, kicked the door. The woman was waiting. She fired at his leg, catching him in the thigh. He screamed, dropped his weapon, but lunged forward anyway. She tried to reload, but he was faster. They grappled, fists in fury and the echo of old wounds. The man burst through the window, tackled Elias from behind. They fell in a heap, rolling across the porch boards, fists landing with the weight of years behind them. You killed my wife, the man roared. Elias grinned through bloodied teeth. She screamed your name when she died. That was the last thing he ever said. The knife entered clean beneath his ribs, one twist, then stillness. The gunfire faded. The last of Elias's men fled, one dragging the wounded, another simply running for the hills. Silence returned. The kind that comes after violence. Raw, empty. The woman limped from the house, bruised and bloodied, but alive. The girl followed. A moment later, eyes wide, they stood on the porch, the three of them, beneath a sky now tinged with gray. He dropped the knife. His hand trembled. Then she reached out, steadying him. They didn't speak. There was nothing left to say, yet everything had changed. The bodies were buried by dusk. No markers, no prayers. Just dirt, silence, and the long shadows of evening stretching across the land like scars that never fully faded. He dug the graves with his own hands. She hauled the stones, sweat streaking her bruised face. The girl stayed inside, watching through a narrow slit in the shutters, eyes too old for someone so young. He didn't speak much during the work, not because there was nothing to say, but because every word would have sounded hollow in the mouth of a man who'd just killed again. The knife still sat in the basin, washed clean, but not forgotten. When they finished, he didn't head back, inside. Instead, he stood by the fence line, gazing out across the empty plains. The land stretched wide and indifferent, dust catching the last of the light like dying embers. Somewhere in that silence, he let himself feel it. The weight, the relief, the grief. She joined him, slow and careful. Her shoulder had been dislocated in the fight, but she hadn't cried out once. Now it was wrapped tight beneath her shirt, stiff with pain, but she walked with her chin high. "You always bury them?" she asked. "When I can. And if you can't?" "I remember where they fell." She nodded. "Better than most." He turned to her then, not just a glance, really turned, eyes meeting hers, full of something raw and unguarded. "You should leave." "No. I'm not the man you think I am. I know exactly who you are, and I'm still standing here." That shook him more than any bullet ever had. Inside, the girl was sketching again. This time it was the ranch, intact, peaceful, the three of them sitting under a tree that didn't exist. She added flowers that had never bloomed, and a sky so blue it looked like a promise. He watched her through the window. "You think it's over," she said behind him. "I want to believe it, but you don't," he sighed. "Men like Elias don't ride alone. They carry shadows with them, echoes. I killed his flesh, but I don't know if I killed what followed him. You can't fight ghosts. I've tried. Then maybe it's time to stop fighting and start living." The way she said it, it didn't sound like an offer. It sounded like a demand. That night, he didn't sleep in the barn. He stayed in the house, boots off, pistol close. The girl slept beside the hearth, her drawings scattered around her like dreams made visible. The woman sat across from him, arm in a sling, a cup of tea in hand. "You never told me her name," he said quietly. She smiled faintly. "You never asked." "I'm asking now." She said the name, simple, gentle. He let it roll through his mind like river water over stone. "And yours?" she asked. He hesitated, then gave it. A name worn down by time and blood. One he hadn't said out loud in years. It felt foreign, then real. Like something reclaimed. For a while, they just sat there, the fire crackling low, the house finally, feeling like something more than walls and nails. It was a fragile peace, but peace nonetheless. It lasted 2 days. On the third morning, the girl screamed. He was out the door in seconds, rifle raised, heart pounding like a drum. She stood at the edge of the yard, pointing toward the hills. A rider, alone, fast. He moved to intercept. The woman joined him, shotgun slung across her back. "Not bandits," he muttered. "Too fast, too desperate." The rider pulled hard on the reins, dust kicking up in angry spirals. He dismounted before the horse even stopped moving, stumbling toward them with a bleeding gash down his leg. "Marshall," he panted. "You're the one who killed Elias?" He didn't correct him. The rider shoved a folded telegram into his hand. They're coming, not for revenge, for territory. Elias was just the beginning. Who? A war party out of the southern ridges. Ex-soldiers, bounty hunters, deserters. They're taking land, property, anything they can hold. Your place, your stand. Put you on the map. He read the telegram. Sparse words. Brutal message. Riders moving north. 10 or more. Armed. Killers. 2 days out. The messenger coughed hard, blood on his lips. He wouldn't make it another day. The woman pulled him inside. The girl ran to fetch water. The man stood on the porch again. Different sky. Same war. But this time, he didn't feel hollow. He felt ready. The next 48 hours were a storm of motion. They reinforced the house, dug new trenches, rigged traps that would give even trained soldiers pause. He taught the woman how to reload faster, how to shoot in the dark, how to breathe slow when the fear tried to claw its way out. He didn't treat her like a helper. He treated her like a partner. They worked side by side, sweat pouring, hands blistered, mouths tight with resolve. At night, they sat with the girl and read from a Bible missing half its pages. Not for faith, but for rhythm, for steadiness, for something older than death. When dawn broke on the second day, he saddled the horse. She watched from the doorway. Where are you going? To meet them. That's suicide. No. It's distraction. If I pull them into the ravine, you have time to run. We're not running. I'm not giving you a choice. She stepped forward, fury in her eyes. You don't get to decide who fights for this place. You don't get to ride off and leave us behind. You're not that man anymore. His voice cracked. And what if I lose? Then lose beside us. It broke something in him, not in a painful way. Like ice finally cracking to let spring in, he dismounted, dropped the reins, nodded once. They'll come through the gulch, he said. We bottleneck them there. You take high ground. I'll draw them forward. Girl? She stays hidden. No arguments. They shook on it, not as strangers, not as two survivors, as something more. The first shot came at midday. A signal. The echo of a horn followed, then dust, then death. The riders moved in tight formation, professionals, disciplined, armored in desperation and cruelty. But they didn't expect a trap. He took the first 3 down with well-placed shots from the ridge. The woman opened fire from the barn loft, raining hell. One tried to flank the house and lost half his leg to a buried charge, screams, chaos. And through it all, the man moved like fire. Untouchable, burning, relentless. They got close. Too close. A bullet grazed his ribs. Another shattered a window beside the girl's hiding place. He barked orders without pause, bleeding but unbowed. Then came the leader, a tall, silent figure with a carbine and a cold, calculating expression. The man recognized him. Former cavalry. Brutal reputation, no mercy. They met near the corral, guns empty, knives drawn, no clever words. No speeches, just steel and grit. The fight was brutal, fast, desperate. The man took a slash across his cheek, drove his shoulder into the other's gut. They fell to the dirt, rolling, fists landing like thunder. The knife was kicked away. Then, a shot, sharp and final. The woman stood 10 paces away, her pistol smoking. The leader crumpled. Silence. The remaining men fled. It was over. The man slumped beside the fence, bleeding, breathing, alive. She knelt beside him, hands trembling but steady as she pressed cloth to the wound. You stayed, he whispered. She smiled, tears on her cheeks. So did you. Later, when the dust settled and the bodies were gone, they sat together beneath the tree the girl had drawn, the one that didn't exist except now it did, planted that morning, fragile but real. A sapling taken from the forest beyond the ridge. The girl had done it in secret. He touched the leaves, soft and trembling in the breeze. Maybe we'll live long enough to see it grow, he said. She leaned against him. We already have, and, For the first time in years, he let himself believe in something more than survival. He believed in home.